up. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sage Cole. This is Friday, August 2nd at the Freiburg New Church Assembly for our second lecture. And this is the third installment of my lectures this week. We started out talking about love as the first, most important element of being in community. Then yesterday, the topic was honesty and truth, second most important. And then if we have love on board and we have honesty on board, then hopefully we get to be useful. And that's the topic of today's lecture. So why don't you go ahead and go to our first slide. I don't have as many slides today because there's a couple things I want to do. But this is one quote from Swedenborg that really brings it home. Granted that so many variations on and differences in doctrine exist, they form a single church when they view life as the goal of theology. That is, when they ask not so much what a person in the church thinks as how the person lives. Emanuel Swedenborg. So it is our being, it is who we are and how we live in the world that really is what matters, is what God has in view. And theology and talking about ideas about that are important and useful insofar as they sink in. And I wonder if all of you are kind of conscious of the difference between knowing something intellectually and kind of knowing something in your heart and in your body and really being able to live it. Have you felt the difference between those two things? They're really different, and it's a very substantial difference, and it's a subtle difference that, Kent, I appreciated your discussion of purity this morning. If we're like, I want to know it and live it, and I must know it and live it, and sometimes that becomes kind of problematic. It's not something we can really force, but it is something that we can intend. We can say, I am seeking truth because I want to live the truth. I want to embody the truth. And I think even in this quote, misinterpretation is very easy, because you could read this quote and say, okay, it's not so much what a person in the church thinks, it's how the person lives. And then you could get really judgmental about how people are living. And from the outside, you could be, oh, that person they haven't been to church in a while, I don't know. Or look at how their children behave. Oof. We could have all kinds of judgments about how people are living. Why do they eat so much meat? Oh, why do they drive that gas guzzler? And this is a temptation in church, for sure, a dangerous temptation. So I think it's important to read this quote in relationship to ourselves. It's always important to keep our eye on ourselves and our own lives. And so on that side, it can be problematic, but then it can also be so opening because it helps us to let go of the judgments about external forms, because we certainly all know deeply loving people outside of our church communities. We know deeply loving people, and we can engage with that deep love and that goodness. And the forms of what we believe aren't as important. I really find this to be very central to Swedenborg and something we really need to wrestle with at this time as our institutions are declining. I love that you named it as this beautiful opportunity, Kent, and I do seek to hold that gift. At different times I've thought, oh, maybe I should go become an Episcopalian. They're a little better off. But then I go, no, we're on the precipice of death. That's a good moment to lead. Look at all this opportunity. And I do feel so much gratitude that so many of the lectures have engaged that reality this week, that we're not hiding from it. It feels hugely heartening to me. So it is about who we are. It's about how we live. If we think about it, all the words that come out of our mouths and that we put into books, it's just jibber jabber to a 1-year-old. It doesn't actually have any substance until it's embodied, until it's in our being. And that really is the goal of Swedenborgian theology. And it's a deep tension that we live in, because we have so many words, so many ideas that Swedenborg used to describe and to invite us into the simple reality of we're here to love each other and to be useful and to embody that. And that's a tension we live in. All right, next slide, Christina. So one of the things in my journey these last few years has been, actually go back to the last one because I want to read it to you. I don't want everybody to get distracted before I've presented it. Can you go back to the last one, Christina? Sorry. Maybe not. There we go. Okay. Don't jump ahead. So many of you probably know Chelsea Odhner. She works for the foundation. She's a fabulous human being on the planet. And we've been having some really great conversations about the church. And one of the things she's doing right now is researching ministers over the generations tied to the convention, tied to the general church, tied to the Lord's New Church, who have been pushed aside or maybe chosen to step out of the institution because of their ideas about what it means to be a new church person. And she's been researching them and their ideas and their influence. And many of them who were sort of pushed out of the institution ended up actually having this great effect on the larger world. And I think it's been interesting to hear about her research, because a big part of my journey has been thinking about Helen Keller, as you all know, and other kind of great ones that we like put up on our website very prominently and say, oh, look at all these fabulous Swedenborgians, Johnny Appleseed out there planting apple trees, and you know, these figures that have been inspired by the vision of the new church and then gone off and done these incredible things. And these figures have had a huge impact on the world, and yet they have not been primarily living with inside this institution. There's been this tension over the generations, and it's the same. It happens in the Catholic Church, right? A lot of those people that were persecuted back then, now over time, eventually they become saints, and the church lifts them up. But in their time, they were not included in the body, and that dynamic has occurred within our Swedenborgian community as well. And at this time of change and destruction, I think this is a primary moment to kind of think about those people and the voices that maybe were not carried forward. So one of those voices, you can go to the next slide, Christina, is this minister, Reverend Benjamin Barrett. So he was back in 1880. And here are his words. No, not doctrine, but life. Not faith, but charity. Not right thinking and believing, but right willing and doing. This is the strong bond of union among the angels in heaven and men upon earth. Where this bond exists, there you will find harmony and union among those of various doctrinal beliefs. A harmony and union all the more perfect too, because of such variety. But where this bond is wanting, no agreement in beliefs, however perfect, will secure or permanently maintain union among men. So he was one of those figures who actually had quite a big following in the larger world and was respected. And he brought together a proposal to convention, actually, of some new foundational statements about how we would be unified that was received by the body but never acted upon. So there are these stories, these figures from the past, and as we imagine into being what we want to carry forward, I often think about the church as like a handbag, and we're carrying a treasure that the Israelites were carrying, and that the followers of Jesus were carrying, and then we've been carrying this handbag of this treasure for generations, and it gets worn out, right? And then we need a new handbag, or maybe we want to put that treasure on a freight train, or there's all of these different ways to carry the treasure. And what's important though is that we just don't start to believe that it's all about the handbag. And well, I really like that handbag, I don't want a new handbag. And then we forget what was inside. All right, our next slide. Okay, so this is what the heart of my talk today. So one of those people who I believe deeply held the treasure of the new church and embodied it and carried it and actually kind of held it out for like the whole planet to see was Helen Keller. And I was so appreciative that you had her on your slide this morning, Ken. You know, she was a global celebrity. And she gave credit to the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg for much of her powerful life. And she didn't attend church on Sundays. She didn't join a particular parish in a way that the rest of us would say, here is a member of the church. But she was devoted and faithful and really seeking to be in relationship with the Swedenborgians of her time. And what I want to offer next, and I hope you might be all willing to kind of go on an imaginative journey with me this morning, is I want to share with you the address that she gave to all of us, to our ancestors. And I'm curious if anyone in this room has ancestors who were in the room. Because this address was given by Helen Keller to the annual convention of the Church of the New Jerusalem, held on May 14th, 1928, at the Church of the Holy City in Washington, D.C., and that's the images up here on the screen. The church that just a couple of months ago went on the market to be sold. Were any of your ancestors in the room, you think? I bet Trevor's ancestors were there. Paul's ancestors were there. Possibly yours, Tina? Anybody else? Yeah, there's a connection between those of us gathered here today and those who were gathered in that room. And the messenger editor of the time, so shout out to Becky, did a really lovely job of setting the scene before Helen gave her address. So I'm going to read the setting of the scene, and then I'll get up here and try to embody Helen's words. And I really invite you to, imagine yourself as your ancestor maybe, if you have a direct descendant, what it was to hear her say these things. And then we'll talk about that. So imagining that space and time are not real, maybe we can really be here and hear her words again. So here's the scene. Hymn 386 was sung, "O love that will not let me go." As its words and music filled the church with their appealing tenderness and beauty, they seemed also to fill the soul of Miss Keller, for radiant smiles of joy would illumine her face with what seemed to us to be heaven's own light. And her arm would now and again spontaneously beat out the rhythm of that joy as it rose to feel with the fluctuation of the music and meaning of the hymn. Now Miss Keller was assisted up into the pulpit, that happy light and smile still playing over her features. Some roses stood in a vase upon the pulpit. Her quickened faculties detected them, and bending over, she paused for a moment to drink in their fragrance. Then she began her address, printed copies of which had been distributed in the pews. With the help of these, it was comparatively easy to follow her every word. She spoke slowly and carefully, and with a clearness of enunciation that seemed like a triumph over the impossible. Her address follows. Since the publication of my book, in which I acknowledge my profound indebtedness to Emanuel Swedenborg for a richer interpretation of the Bible, a deeper understanding of the meaning of Christianity, and a precious sense of the divine presence in the world, I have been asked a great many questions which trouble my heart and awaken disturbing thoughts in my mind. What I'm going to say to you today has been suggested by these questions and my reflections upon the state of mind they reveal. An earnest friend asks me, what is the attitude of people who believe in Swedenborg's doctrine of charity, which you explain in your book, towards the practical problems of our day? What are they doing to promote peace and goodwill among men? A college student writes, I do not find the new church, which embodies the teachings of Christ so powerfully elucidated by Swedenborg, leading any movement for world betterment. A zealous worker for universal peace and brotherhood inquires, did the followers of Swedenborg stand together in the effort to uphold the principles of their seer and of our Lord and Savior in the debacle of the World War? A radical writes, "It seems to me that your new church variety of Christians is not very different from the other churches, like the Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, Presbyterians, and the evangelical denominations. They confess the Lord in the sanctuary and deny him in the marketplace." A young man says, "The acquiescent, conciliatory attitude of the Christian church towards a corrupt, cruel, and acquisitive society is a repudiation of the Christ gospel." These are only a few of the questions which have been brought to my attention during the past 6 months. They indicate the feeling of many thoughtful people that Christianity is receding rather than growing power. Some of the churches realize that their people are leaving them, and without understanding the cause, they try all manner of expedients to hold their flocks together. They say, "We are living in a materialistic age, which must give the people material attractions in the churches." As a result, we see preacher actors, concerts, motion pictures, mass and frenzied acrobatics in some of the churches. Still, the exodus continues, and the people murmur, and the light of faith grows dimmer in men's hearts. What is the cause of this ever-increasing darkness in the tabernacles of God? Why is humanity losing its belief in the likableness of Christianity? While seeking the answer to these questions, I opened Swedenborg's True Christian Religion, and there I found the answer. Where there is no good of life, there is no longer a church. Where people cease to apply their beliefs to practical living, there is no faith. Is not that what has happened to the Christian church? No church can inspire noble ideals in the people if it does not follow the aims laid down for us by our Lord. My friends, we have let very different aims choke the seed he would plant in our hearts. We have pursued vain things. Possessed by ambition for earthly power and dominion, we have sought to subject others to our will and law. To satisfy our desires, we have profaned our faith and desecrated the Holy of Holies and the lives of our fellow men. By word and deed, we have denied the Lord and betrayed him to his enemies. 2,000 years ago, he clothed himself in flesh that he might walk with men and show them how to live together in peace. Through poverty, through persecution, through betrayal, he lived his life before their eyes, going about his Father's business, healing the sick, comforting the sorrowful, opening the eyes of the blind, and setting free captive minds. He dwelt among the poor and despised of the people and ministered to their physical needs. He never told them it was an advantage for men to live in horrid, unwholesome dwellings, nor did he tell them it was a disadvantage for men to live under healthy, pleasant, and decent conditions. Neither did he ever say that impoverished people were necessarily good. That would not have been true. The poor must perforce think more than they should about external necessities. That is part of the misery of being poor. What Jesus did say was that accumulating or possessing external things is not an advantage. Happiness and virtue are inside of us. If we could only realize that, we should not want to be rich. When the rich young man came to him asking what he should do to be saved, Jesus said, "You should give up hampering possessions. They prevent you from realizing the best that is in you." He said the same thing to his disciples. He told them to go out into the world and preach his gospel of service. He said that the world would not welcome them, but this was not to trouble them. They were to be calm and speak boldly. If a man took their cloak, they were to give him their coat also, just to show that material things were of secondary importance. Even if people used violence against them, they were warned not to be violent in turn. They who take the world shall perish by the sword, he told them. Love is the power that saves. Love ye one another as I have loved you, and ye shall be blessed of your Father, which is in heaven. How then can deliverance come through churches which begin their deliberations by banishing love? Love carries away the light when it departs. My friends, we have wandered very far from the teachings of our Lord. We have lost our way in the maze of an evil system which makes a lie of Christianity. We cannot have a Christ-like civilization until we have a Christ-like church. If the people are to find spiritual joy in the church must establish upon earth practical Christianity. It must make of human life something more than a battlefield of ruthless competition. When Christians live by the golden rule, there will be no more empty churches. The church will then, in very truth, be the home that our hearts yearn for. It seems to me that the new church has a great mission in the world. The people are in need of just the message which Swedenborg gave. Instead of merely listening to that message, we should go out and teach it. We have a precious treasure in the vessel of the new church, and we must be careful not to value the vessel more than the treasure. I sometimes think that the withdrawing attitude of the new church keeps people from knowing what a glorious message it has in trust for those who are lost in the fogs of materialism. With all its abounding humanity, Swedenborg's message does not reach the ears of all sorts and conditions of men. If the message does not reach them, it is due not to any narrowness in the Christian ideal which it foreshadows, but to lack of zeal on the part of those who possess it. I want to see the new church put on its beautiful garments and shake itself from the dust of aloofness. It is understood by some today that religion must not be treated as an elemental force, but as a good form diversion, somewhat tiresome and conventional. The one point agreed upon by all, or nearly all, cautious, discreet preachers is that no pulpit reference should be made to any controversial topics. Let not such problems as politics and war and industrialism be touched upon in the sanctuary. We assume that the powers that be are ordained by God. We belong first to the state and must have no will of our own. We may discuss ad infinitum evidences of Christianity, but most of the evidences are in the past. It occurs to very few people that God still speaks to his children. May it not be the mission of our little band of new churches to spread over the kingdom of the world the astonishing fact that the religion of Jesus Christ is a contagious reality, that there is still in the lowliest men and women something called faith which will respond to men speaking with the greatest of all authority, the authority of an inward conviction of the truth of his message. Then society would be so completely transformed that in nothing will the new order resemble at all that of the old. Christianity will yet inundate the world like the ocean at flood time. It will overwhelm, submerge, and regenerate mankind. No man-built barrier of warships, armies, and fortifications shall stay the oncoming of the mighty waters. Sex, color, races, and creeds shall be washed and purified in the tidal waves of fraternal transformation. When the day dawns, a man will walk with the sun of love before his face, and it will shine wherever two men look at each other. For the sun of love is all created things, the substance and the life. In its bosom lies the future of all things. It is from the sun of love that wisdom springs, And through its potency, man develops whatever in his nature is patterned after the divine. Now the chair speaks. You have heard these words spoken. You have read them in type. Take your copy home with you. Read it over again. Let your interest in having heard this wonderful friend speak give way to the meaning of what she writes. She has said that which needed most to be said. Love carries away the light when it departs. Just staying in this imaginative space for a minute, where we've just heard Helen speak. I don't know what conversations happened afterwards, but I can suspect, based on the way things have unfolded, that there wasn't a huge movement to say, "Oh, Helen, yes, what shall we do together?" And I wonder how different our lives today would be had that response happened. She was a global celebrity. Think of what we could have done with her. Had we been open to imagining something new. And so I offer this address because maybe 100 years later isn't too late. This was 1928, right? Yeah, so. What I'm suggesting, what I'm offering, what I'm hoping to bring into the world is really in its most simplest way to express a form whereby we might imagine new ways of being church that perhaps could live into some of what Helen hoped for in our community. My experience of this denomination and the churches that we have, I've served quite a few different ones, and it's very easy to get attached to the vessel. It's almost probably impossible not to, because we get familiar with it and it's what we see. And sometimes it's all we can see and we can't actually even see the treasure inside. We maybe catch glimpses of it. But the thing we're most familiar with and the thing we have a little bit of control over is the vessel. And I don't know if this has always been true about the Swedenborgian Church, but at this moment, many of our congregations have quite different vessels that they're sort of equally attached to. And none of these vessels are bad or wrong, or I don't think any of them should be abandoned wholeheartedly. And it's only one way to carry the treasure. When I think about our youth and teens and young ones, when I think about all of those who have been influenced by this tradition but aren't able to find purchase within a society or community, to me, it feels like that is just sort of an obvious truth. Because that exists, there's some kind of disconnect in our ability to be flexible about the vessels, so that we can continue to have each generation involved in carrying it ahead, but in new ways. I know that it feels maybe heretical, but some of the things we do in church are kind of arbitrary. They're not, there's nothing inherently perfect about any external form if it doesn't hold that love within that Helen spoke about. And I think it's possible that many, many other forms of being in community could rise up from the ash heap of what the new church is right now, that would not abandon any of the treasure of our community, but instead cause it to shine more brightly. Why don't we go to the next slide? I'll just speak for a couple more minutes. So again, this is sort of the tagline of the initiative that I'm seeking to establish right away, hopefully, right away in the fall. I was sort of right in the midst of all of this as my external commitments were changing. But I believe this model of be love, be honest, be useful, of keeping these three movements central to how we gather with each other. Part of what is at the ground of this idea is that this is inherently a flexible system. The problem with some of our bylaws and our liturgies is they're sort of inflexible. Some communities figure out how to be flexible with them, and that's great. But it's also usually flexible with a lot of things that have to stay steady. So yeah, you can make this change and that change, but this has to stay the same. And what I am seeking to create is a model that would be unified so that there would be a sense of unity between the different communities that are gathering and the different offerings that are being made, but that could be changeable and flexible based on the needs of those gathering and also the inspirations that God will then implant in them of what they want to do and how they want to be living in the world. And in my experience, in my more challenging experiences of new church community, because in my experience, I think we'd sometimes leave some of those three out. And Helen was already saying that 100 years ago, that love isn't always held first and foremost, and wasn't at the time. That we're not always really totally honest about the situations that we're dealing with. And that when we aren't honest and we don't know what's really going on, it's very hard to be useful. It's very hard to, it's just, God can't work with that. God can't work with that. So that's the other reason that I feel very called to to keeping these three things central in whatever is happening, because it helps us to remember these essential forces of what God is. And in my mind, if this is what God is, then this is how we participate in that divine life, by keeping these three things central, making space for it. Now, right now, as some of you joined me last night for the Thursday night group, and I was so grateful for your participating. You know, right now that circle is just human beings. It's just, I see it as kind of primarily a way of gathering that's useful to our individual regeneration. It's really lovely to sit with other people in a spirit of love, where you get to be telling, the honest truth about your experience right now, hearing what's honest for others, and then supporting each other and doing useful things. It's lovely. And so far it's been mostly about our kind of grappling with our own personal changes and experiences and challenges. And it's so normalizing when you hear what someone else is going through. You go, oh, yes, okay, I'm not the only one. And as Kent brought up this morning, it's beautiful and loving and hopeful, not just when everybody has good news to share, but when they share about their real struggle and their pain. In some ways, that's even more hopeful, because we can then see the way this is just a part of being a human being. Long term, though, my vision is that these groups could live within many different communities, that we could have many local be love, be honest, be useful group gatherings around the country, around the globe perhaps. And at the same time, we could have groups gathering from different locations, but around shared purposes or shared interests. Been in conversation with Catherine about making her singing bowl offering a be love offering. It could be a model for doing really important work in the world, bringing about change and transformation. And maybe some groups would really focus on the useful part of their gathering, and that would be where they put more energy. But they wouldn't go to that useful part until they had taken the time to remember that we're here for love and to check in about what's honestly going on. One of the hardest things I think about working with other people is when our egos rise up and we have a mission, and then we start to sacrifice the means for the ends, right? We say, I have this idea, and this is what's true, and I'm just going to tell you what's true because it's what's true. This is the old way of speaking. I'm going to go into the writings and tell you what Swedenborg really meant. And I'm going to And when we do that, when we don't take responsibility for naming where this wisdom is coming from and what my experience is, it just becomes an opportunity for competition and fighting. But as I think I already named earlier on, when we can connect with each other on a real foundation of here I am, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is the insight I'm getting, and this is how I see it, then we're not in competition with each other. We're just shining light on something, and then someone else can shine light on it in the way they want to. And I do believe in that honesty and in that openness, there can be incredible creativity that can emerge, that I would like to encourage in our church, in our denomination. And I think one addition, Kent, I appreciated you lifting up my unique vision, and that I have a unique vision and you have a unique vision, and maybe they can be woven together in some way. Because I think I still deeply believe that our purpose is to be church. And maybe we have a lot of negative associations of what that means, but we can live into that with the positive associations that Swedenborg teaches us, that church is that body of humans who are seeking to be connected to the most real thing, to truth. They're seeking to love one another. To me, that's all the joy of life, is when that's happening. And I am deeply sad that it's so hard for it to happen right now in our, I probably wouldn't be in the position I am now if there was a thriving congregation out there that wanted to hire me, and I would do all of the old forms. I love them. There's nothing wrong with them. And it's just not what's happening now. So how can we make something new happen, where we can be knit together, where we can be connected, and where we could create a connected network that actually could benefit my boys in 4 years, that could really live in a way that could create some of this connection that we all long for kind of quickly. And in my mind, the best way to do that is to use the blessings of the internet, and for everyone to be involved, not just me. And I think there's a way that we can create a network of community that doesn't feel like, because we're all too busy, right? We don't have any extra time to do new things, but maybe there are things we're already doing, gifts we're already bringing that could be brought more fully with the support of a network, of a virtual space where other people can plug in. Because the other thing I deeply believe is we need to be connected, and there are so many other lost souls out there that are seeking connection. That are finding wisdom online and finding lots of people they can listen to and hear about, but are not finding that real relationship that really gives you the fullness of blessing. And I believe we can create some of that spaces for that real relationship in virtual space through Zoom and other technologies, and then through camps and retreats and experiences of in-person connection. And if we can stop seeing church as just one thing and see each kind of church, each style of gathering as beautiful and glorious in its own right, then we can just coexist together like a field of wildflowers. We don't have to be in competition. We don't have to be, the old church is bad and now we're going to do the new. But what is each one bringing? I really can imagine this manifesting, and I imagine it going in so many different ways. I've been having conversations with other ministers about building, if it's a virtual community, maybe it needs to be inside of a video game, which kind of makes my head want to explode because I hate video games. And then it makes me go, of course I'm going to have a video game ministry because that's how God would work, right? But let's imagine new things. Let's not be in competition with one another, like Helen was advocating us. Let's cooperate and seek to lift the gift that each one of us holds up. There's so much talent. There's so much goodness inside of our tradition, and also those who have already been kind of pushed out, who maybe would be willing to kind of come back if there were ways to plug in meaningful possibilities. So let's go to the last slide, Christina. So that QR code, if you want to be super active and respond, that QR code will lead you to a survey that I sent out during convention, which is a very practical survey about how you might actually want to be involved in this in the coming year, whether you might be willing to be a part. Maybe we want to have a FNCA, Be Loved, Be Honest, Be Useful group where you meet once a month, where you get the opportunity to stay connected, where maybe people who haven't come to FNCA in a while would like to come connect and reconnect. I'm hoping to just start to create some really practical offerings that can start right away in this coming year to make space for us to just come together, learn about each other, and start to nurture these new seeds of what might be possible. So that is my offering, and we have a little time for comments and questions. S-O-N. Yeah. Oh, actually, no, excuse me. No, it was S-U-N. I lied. It's capitalized, though. Son is capitalized, and so is love.
Say, I'm praying for you. A lot of the comments that I hear from people who are not churchgoers is like, well, we need to do something more than praying. Like, is that all you're going to do? Or, the Middle East is a mess. Well, we're praying, and there's sort of a sense like, well, what's that going to do? Mm-hmm. So there's that piece. And then the other thing I was thinking is sometimes when I'm in church, I think like we're sitting here and we're all, I love church, I just say that, I absolutely love it, but sometimes I think, why aren't we all out just like doing something right now? Why aren't we helping our neighbor right now? We could all just walk out today and go help, Mrs. So-and-so down the street instead of sitting here and praying for her. So I think there are a lot of ways that we can think about at least even adding to our church experience. And I was thinking even here at camp, should we be thinking about having a spaghetti supper for the town? Or I don't know. It takes a lot to sort of let go of like, this is our place and, this is what we do here, but maybe we need to be doing more. It's just a thought.
Maybe there's not a should, but maybe with the nurturing of space, someone might be really inspired and we might want to do it together. And I would just share one of the ideas that's come up when I was at Almont. There's several elders there who can't really get out, but they do Reiki and pray. And one of the things I would love to get going in the next year is on Saturday at 2 p.m., these ladies are going to be praying for you. Would you like to have that? Because we do need prayer. And we believe there's something that actually happens on a deeper level. And there can also be, this is how you can get active. We need all of it. Yeah.
I was at church in my local area a couple weeks ago, and there were only like 12 people there. And somebody said frustratingly, why isn't everybody coming? And somebody else said, because of the phone. I'm too old to understand that, but maybe we should have a video game.
Yeah.
You said she gave this address after her book had come out. Mm-hmm. Is that the My Religion or Light in My Darkness book?
My Religion, yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then can we get copies of that address?
Sure, I have a copy. I could print some if people would like, or I could email it to you.
Thank you. Great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sage. I don't have ancestors who are at that speech, but I do have a mother who saw Helen Keller in the New York church in the, I think, the mid-50s, very, very much toward the end of her life. And Annie Sullivan wasn't with her anymore, another woman. But the one thing that my mother reports, because she was a young girl, was how someone who could not communicate with her eyes had the happiest, smilingest eyes. And that stuck with her. It's like, how could that be? It was her natural expression.
This is Susanna, and I just want to say one of the most powerful tours I've ever taken was Perkins School for the Blind, which the Mass Union had as our field trip one year. And realizing that if it weren't for Annie Sullivan being, in a sense, thrown away and not having anyone who could reach her, finally being reached with love by the housekeeper. And that is how she started to come out of her shell and become who she was to Helen, was the love of someone. That it all starts with love. And the fact that we talk about how Annie blessed Helen, but in so many ways Helen blessed Annie by having that relationship.
Yeah. Well, and you might have heard me talk about this already, and you'll see it on the survey, but one of the events that I hope to put on that was in the works is to have a celebration every year on March 3rd, which is the day that Annie and Helen met each other. And Helen always celebrated that as her spiritual birthday. And so the intention in March 3rd is to have a Be Love event where speakers from different religious traditions and communities speak about love. We have musicians talking and playing about love so that we realize we can come together. And it was very powerful to bring this to my chaplain community in Harvard. And it was the Muslim chaplain was there and the Jewish chaplain, and we'd just been dealing with campus riots and all these problems that are happening. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right time to bring this idea. They're like, this is the perfect time to bring this idea. So it is to me, it feels like a place where our tradition has done incredible work over the generations. Our involvement in the World Parliament of Religions was huge. It's one of the missions, it feels to me, of the new church, is to proclaim and make space for the unity amongst our differences, which is hard to do if we're too tied only to our own perspective and ways. Thank you, everyone. Please talk to me if you have ideas.